commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Marquis de Lafayette's final visit to our region, honoring the man whose courage and leadership helped secure America's independence during the Revolutionary War. From his bravery alongside George Washington to the ideals he carried across continents, Lafayette left a legacy that lives on right here in our name, Fayette County. The day begins in Brownsville and continues with a special ceremony at 2:30 p.m. in front of the Fayette County Courthouse in Uniontown. Then, cap off the celebration with a family picnic and live concert at Washington Run Park in Perryopolis, featuring music from Tim Litvin. Food, music, and fun for all ages. Don't miss this chance to celebrate our history, our community, and the enduring spirit of freedom. Mark your calendar, Friday, May 30th. Learn more at Fayette County PA 250th on Facebook.
And it's 11:26. It's now time for attorney Joe Fieschko of Fieschko Law Offices with an office in Uniontown on East Main Street, specializing in personal injury, workers' compensation, Social Security, disability, and bankruptcy. Call 724-439-8300 or 800-242-2412. And we say good morning to attorney Joe Fieschko. Joe, how are you today?
Well, good morning to you, TJ. I'm happy to be here in the studio, and I actually have a guest, and that's Vince Quattrini.
Good morning.
And there's a reason he's here. I am going to join the Quattrini Law Firm on June 1st. So I've got Vince here to help me explain who they are and what we do and how we're going to work together. But I want to go back just for a little bit to when all of this started, because it's the first time I've ever done this. That has changed the nature of the firm.
Yeah, let me jump in too and invite our audience to listen to your legal journey. Joe has been a very, very accomplished attorney, and the people of Uniontown have had that experience. So, Joe, tell us about how it started and how you got to where we are today.
Well, I'm from Pittsburgh, and in 1975, I graduated from Brown University, and that's an Ivy League school, and I'm actually going to my 50th reunion later this month. Let's see, who's in my class? The governor of Rhode Island, of course, and a actress named Bess Armstrong, and there's a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah, nobody more important than you.
Ha! Anyway, so I am going to that. Now, as soon as I got out of Brown, I went to the University of Pittsburgh Law School, went directly through, so I got out of that in 1978. And I think I was 24 years old. And I was hired by a law firm in Menneson, Shire, Bergstein, and Caruso. And Gary Caruso was a judge for many years.
In Westmoreland County, absolutely.
Yeah. And Bernie Shire just retired. I think he was in his 90s.
He was in his 90s.
Kind of funny. But those guys did a lot of personal injury work and some workers' comp. But back in the day, most of the workers' comp was done by union attorneys. They had kind of everybody was in a union.
Yep.
They had to go to the union guys, and it was Spagnoli,
Caroselli,
Spagnoli, and Beechler,
Yep.
and Caroselli went to Brown too.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But anyway,
Good law firm. Good law firm.
So, we did some workers' comp, a lot of personal injury work, and for many years we had the biggest verdict in Westmoreland County. It was for a guy named Harold Lynn, and he was from Bell Vernon, and he got hit by a truck from the Washburn Candy Company. But anyway, so that was a big deal. They gave me my own office after I was there for a year in Bell Vernon, and I was part of the firm, of course, but in those days, I was on my own with a secretary in Bell Vernon, and every Saturday morning I had to come in and report to them the events of the week. So that was good, and I really started developing the Social Security disability practice at that point. So then in 1981, after I'd been with them for 3 years, I opened my own practice. And from my experiences with them, I had a lot of clients in Uniontown, and weirdly enough, I still have clients from Shire and Bergstein from Uniontown that come in.
Oh
And
my goodness.
yeah, one of them, Jim Gibson, calls me
Yeah.
all the time still.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it hung in there. And my thought was, back in those days, if I can be frank with you, um, most of the lawyers in Pittsburgh stayed in Pittsburgh. You know, the idea of working remotely was kind of odd. But I had a car phone even back
Hmm.
then, and I had a computer then too. So you could do those kinds of things, and you could have a dictaphone, a little portable dictaphone. And back in those days, lawyers drank a lot. So in Pittsburgh, everybody would head to the bars after work.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
said, well, instead of heading to the bar, I think I'll just come home from Uniontown. So, that was, and it worked out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then for a long time, I did a lot of personal injury work always, workers' comp, social security, disability. And then I did some bankruptcy work for a long time, a lot of bankruptcy work, and some wills and estates. So I expanded it. And then I became sort of an expert in this unpaid overtime case. And those cases took me all over the country.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, well, it began with the Exxon Valdez, representing all of
Oh
the
my goodness.
insurance adjusters on that case. And that's kind of what led to the other ones, because those same guys that worked on that catastrophe then went on to New Mexico because the government had a controlled burn in New Mexico to keep the fires down, and they wound up setting fire to most of the state.
Oh my gosh.
So that was called the Cerro Grande fire, and that was a big one for insurance adjusters. Then they go to LA because there was these big mold claims things. And the companies back in those days kept making the same mistake of not paying these guys overtime. But the giant one, of course, was the BP Horizon oil spill.
Hmm.
And that was down in New Orleans, and we wound up getting those guys 14.9 million bucks.
Oh my
So,
goodness. That's
so that
amazing.
was
Yeah.
that was by far the biggest one.
Congratulations. Yeah.
But then we had a lot of local ones. The those guys that drive the Frito Lay trucks.
All right.
You see them in Giant Eagle. They were getting paid under the wrong formula, and Frito Lay didn't seem to know it. Well, they learned that they were,
Yeah. For
and
sure.
we won that up in front of Joy Conti Flowers, and just a myriad of them. There was the park rangers that work at the Albert Gallatin House in Fort Necessity. They were not getting the right overtime, all kinds of those cases. So those are interesting cases, and I kept doing them.
Yeah, and they're still occurring today, aren't they?
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, if you are not getting paid overtime, or if you're not getting paid all of the time you're entitled to. And let me talk about that issue just for a second. The most famous cases on those were in the poultry industry. And the way that works is if you're working at a poultry plant, and usually they're in like Delaware, uh, these people would go to work, and you can't just walk in. You have to take off your jeans and your
Right.
T-shirt, put on the a uniform, get disinfected, then you go in. So then, 8 hours after plucking feathers and gutting chickens,
Wow.
you don't want to go home like that.
Yeah.
So then they have to reverse the process. So they take all their clothes off, they shower, they disinfect, they put their jeans and their T-shirt back on, they go home. Well, the poultry industry wasn't paying for this, what they call donning and doffing. They weren't getting paid for,
Donning, putting on the whole everything, and then doffing, taking it all off at the end.
yeah,
They paid you once you got inside the door completely dressed.
right. And anything you're doing that's an integral part of your job is work. So you've got to get paid for that time, because the essence of it is, now, there's exemptions. Like Vince and I are both exempt because we're attorneys, and no one's buying my time. Okay, I go in there and produce things. I'm just, we do unique things. But most people that work in this country are selling their time to their employer, And if you're doing things that are to the employer's benefit and you're not getting paid, then they owe you. And most of these things, of course, are class actions because,
What's a class action mean to the audience?
well, the way a class action works, and this is a little complicated, most of us are familiar with what are called opt out class actions. Let me tell you what that is. I'm sure that everybody listening to this program has gotten these little notes saying you're entitled to $12.50 because for a year and a half when you had Verizon, they were doing something illegal.
Right.
So you don't do anything, and then you get this little check for $12.51. So that's called an opt out class action.
So these are all of the Verizon customers who had the account during that period of time, and somebody has sued on behalf of all of them. And at the end of the story, I get a check for $12.50.
Yes, and that's the one we're most familiar with. Now, the class actions for unpaid overtime are usually brought under this law called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is a federal law, and those are opt-in class actions. And the way that one works, and I'll give you a really funny example. On the BP case, there was 1,200 of these adjusters that were adjusting mostly business interruption claims. You know, fishermen that couldn't fish, restaurants that couldn't serve food, all that stuff. So there's 1,200 of them. So we sent out notices to all 1,200 saying, we've got this class action going. We don't know how it's going to go. But if you want to get in on it, sign this thing and you're part of it. And I think there was 700 out of the 1,200 that opted in because people are always, you know, what if I never get hired again by doing this?
All right.
So then we won the first part, and we're still within the statute of limitations. So we did it again.
Oh, wow. And
So
the
there's-
rest of the people joined.
Well, close.
They
There's
told
five.
They told their friend, hey, guess what I got? I got
Yeah,
a check in the mail.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
getting paid.
well, that's the way hearing loss cases go
Yeah,
too, but we'll
right.
get to that in a second. But anyway, so there's 500 left. 300 more opted into the second one. They got the same money that the first guys got, and 200 people didn't. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the way an opt-in class action works. Once in a while, you'll be able. Okay, this really gets complicated.
Yeah,
But
you
there-
know what? We probably ought to be careful on complicated.
All right.
And if somebody has that kind of question, call your number at the office.
That is correct.
Come in, and we'll talk about it. Right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll give you one time worked case that I did a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and this was the canine officers at the airport, at the Pittsburgh airport,
Okay.
and those guys who are usually working in baggage, and they always look for bombs and drugs, and they never found any bombs, thank goodness, but they found a lot of drugs over the years, and their problem was this. They have this dog, and it's not a pet. You know, this dog is a highly trained, extremely valuable dog, and the dog lived with them. So they would work 40 hours a week. But guess what? When you
Yeah.
take a dog
Right.
home, you don't turn it off like your
Right.
car.
Right. Got to feed them. Got to wash them. Right.
Take them to the vet.
Take them to the vet.
You know, comb their hair, whatever
Yep.
they're going to do. So, and they weren't getting paid for that.
Ah.
So that's another time worked example.
Okay.
So anyway, so that was always an interesting specialty. What I was going to say was this is starting to happen, and Vince has been joining me in this venture. Around here, the big coal mines are owned by Consolidation Coal, which they just sold. The one client just told us what their new name is.
I can't remember.
I
what
can't
it
remember,
was.
but
Yeah,
it's-
the console sold out. to
Yeah,
them.
Consol sold it to a new company.
Yep.
But they're the big coal mines here, and then there's another one in Cumberland. The Cumberland mine's still open. But the big employer up in Somerset area was Corsicoal,
Mm, right,
and
right,
Corsa just went under.
right.
So about I think it was 362 miners got notice, and the other companies up there went under too, Heritage and all that. And it's funny because I was talking to Judge Minich the other day,
Right.
and he was asking me about it, and I said, "Yeah, they're all closing here." And he says, "Well, I thought these coal companies were supposed to be opening now." I
Right.
said, "Well,
Right.
not these ones." So
Yeah.
anyway, but what happens is when a coal mine closes, now a lot of people are younger and able-bodied, and they're fine. But a lot of the guys are over the age of 55 and have ruptured discs and torn rotator cuffs and things like that, and they're just limping along. So a lot of times we can get them on workers' comp. A lot of times we can get them on Social Security disability because they can't be coal miners anymore.
And when you're over 50 and can't do what you used to do for your lifetime, the Social Security Administration kind of says it's too hard to retrain you, so we will entitle you to Social Security disability benefits.
Yeah, it's really hard to get it when you're under the age of 50.
Right,
At 50, it becomes easier. 55, it becomes really easy.
right.
So we get that. And then there's always a bunch of people that lost their hearing.
Yep.
And
You can imagine, working in a coal mine over a number of years with those kinds of loud sounds, even if you have ear protection, it's just going to take its toll. So, what are we doing? Explain what we're doing with the individuals from these companies that are going out with regard to hearing loss.
well, if you are laid off from the coal mine or any place that's noisy,
Sure,
a lot of
sure.
these fracking facilities are noisy,
Yep.
certain factories or mills are noisy. So if you go out of work and you think you've lost some hearing, you come on in and I get you tested by an otolaryngologist. And under the AMA formula, if you have less than 10% loss, I can't help you. But if you have over 10% loss, I can help you.
And the Workers' Comp Act has a formula for what your benefits would be depending on the percentage of hearing loss.
They do. And for example, if you have a 10% loss, you get 26 weeks of benefits. And I won't get into that too much, but let's say that your workers' comp rate's $1,000. If you break your leg and you're entitled to $1,000 a week, well, if you have a 10% loss, you get 26 weeks or 26,000. If you have a 20% loss, 52,000. A 30% loss, 78,000.
And part of the key with hearing loss, of course, is distinguishing between your hearing loss at the age of 56 that anybody at age 56 would have versus what you have. What are the terms that they use for what is normal hearing loss by age and by trauma?
Well, with age, the everybody goes deaf by the time they're 90. If you're in a room of 90-year-olds,
Yeah.
most of them can sort of kind of hear, but really can't hear very well. So that all happens with age. And in the state of Pennsylvania, there's no automatic deduction for age. And I have found that people over the age of 55 tend to have higher percentages of hearing loss. But most of it is those are the guys that have been in the mill for 40 years.
Yep.
Just by getting old, you're
Right.
also been in the mine or the mill forever.
Oh, and or you've been on a construction site running a drill or loud equipment.
Well, that can happen, but with that kind of activity, you can only go against one employer. Okay.
Right.
And
That's traumatic hearing loss.
well, and even over time. So, for example, if you've worked for Consol for 30 years, we're all set. But for years ago, the Boilermakers Union had me in to talk to them. They're on Banksville Road. So some of those guys work in the same, what do they call those things? The same energy plant, like Homer Simpson.
Right.
So those guys were all set because it's very noisy. They couldn't hear. They had one employer. Some guys would come in and say, "Well, every year I've worked for somebody different. Who am I going to pin that on?" So that doesn't work. There's a weird niche here in Fayette County for those. Um, on the Mon River, they make barges.
Yep.
And it used to be called Trinity Barge, then it was Hillman Barge, then HBC. But there's a few barge companies. Those people come under this act called the Longshore and Harbor Workers Act. And for them, there's no statute of limitations, which is hilarious. So I can have an 80-year-old guy hasn't worked there 30 years come in. He's got a case, which is not true in Pennsylvania.
Right.
He's got to do it within 3 years. Go ahead.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
step, but that's what I wanted you to point out to the audience is there are time limits for a hearing loss claim once you go out the door.
Right. You have to file it within 3 years of your date of your last exposure to the hazardous noise. And I actually had the big case on that, Ferrucci versus LTV. This was a guy who worked in Aliquippa in the gigantic LTV steel mill. And he'd worked as a regular guy forever, but he was a little smarter than the rest, so they put him in the office his last 5 years. And the LTV's big argument was, well, he was out of the noise every 5 years. So in his testimony, he said, well, no, twice a day I had to go collect these samples throughout the mill because, we were testing the samples. So I was exposed, but it wasn't for the whole time. And that was the big question. And I won. And then they took it to Commonwealth Court, and what was his name? Judge Stone, I think his name was. He used to be in Washington County, was the DA, and then he became a Commonwealth Court. But he wrote a big opinion, and it's in, and I'm looking at a book, by the way. So let me teach you about workers' compensation in Pennsylvania. Most attorneys, there's only a certain number of people that do it, and even fewer people that know how to do it. So, and I'll give you an example. I have a good relationship with the judges, and for my hearings, since COVID, the hearings are almost always on the internet. So I always have my client in my Uniontown office or my Somerset office, and we do it together. And the judges are so relieved because they say, we try and get these guys to do it like by telephone. And, they're in their house and their dog's barking and their baby's crying. And then they're walking into the next room to get better service. And I said, it's stupid. Yeah. So by getting the guy in, they're prepared. When they are asked a question, they don't try to avoid the answer.
Yeah, sitting side by side makes a big difference for the judge to be able to see them, for you to be able to ask the questions. We do that in all of our offices. We set up a video system, and when we ask our clients to come in, we want the judge to see you sitting beside us. It makes a big difference.
Oh, it really does. But anyway, so what and actually we kind of went off script here. So getting back to the ranch here, I've been doing this forever based on what I just told you. And on June 1st, I'm joining Vince's firm, and I'm stepping back from a lot of the day-to-day stuff. And the reason I chose his firm, and I found out that everybody wanted me to join their firm. It's like, okay, well, that's good, but I want to choose what I think is the best for my clients. And I'm looking at a yellow book, and Vince Quattrini is the author. And it's called Pennsylvania Workers' Compensation Practice and Procedure. And every workers' compensation attorney that knows what they're doing looks at this thing constantly. It's about 3 inches thick. Now, Vince didn't write it alone. There's a list of judges and other, noteworthy attorneys that wrote it with him. But he's kind of a preeminent workers' compensation lawyer. So I said, this is the guy. And so I met with him. I don't know if it was last year or the year
Actually, it
before.
was the year before in Hershey. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. There is a annual meeting of all the workers' compensation judges and lawyers in Hershey, which is a nice place to go.
Hmm.
And it takes 2 days. So I approached Vince and said, it's Regina and I were kind of a one-man band, and we're getting older, so we don't want to do this the way we've been doing it forever. And I did want to throw this in. Um, I think many of you know that in the olden days, I did have associates and other people working for me. But on my 50th birthday, which was 2003, Regina and I decided to do this by ourselves. And I didn't, fire anyone, but I said, yeah, we're going to do this by ourselves. Go, find a job over the next year. And everybody did. Nobody lost a dime. But then we started keeping track of our clients. We have them in this computer database. And since we started doing it in the early 2000s, we've got over 12,000 people in our database.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So every time
Yeah.
we want to see how many hearing loss cases we've done, we can just hit the button and there's find it. Every time I want to find how many people I represented from Dunbar or from Gans or wherever, I just hit it. Or when people call up, I had a lady that's coming in later this afternoon that I'm doing a little favor for, and she said, "Oh yeah, you represented my husband for a hearing loss case," and I looked it up, and it was in 2006, and it was all before me. So it's a beautiful database.
Well, and you have such a distinguished career, Joe. I mean, you have earned the excellent reputation for every area of practice, and that's why we're excited that you're joining us. And like you said, our practice areas match. We do workers' compensation, Social Security, disability, and PI, auto accidents, and the like. We also do, and we were going to try to find some time, but we're probably going to run out. We'll do it another program. We represent veterans who have service-connected disabilities.
Now this is new.
Yep.
Because I remember nobody used to do it because there was a law saying you could charge your client $10.
Right.
So guess what?
Right.
Yeah, when that's the law, nobody's taking those cases.
Right. And now that law has been amended. We only get paid if the client gets the benefit.
Sure.
And it's only out of the back benefit, and it's a 20% fee. But as our audience knows, if you're a veteran and you've applied for this benefit, it's a long road, it's a tortured road. And what we've been able to do is make it easier because we know the medicine. We have the doctors who we bring in to help prove their PTSD or prove something from the burn pits that they were exposed to, or their low back condition, or their knee that they hurt running through the fields of Afghanistan. So we've been doing it now 17 years. What I'm proud of is that my son, Michael, has developed that expertise. And we have a young lady, Erica Dowd, who is now working with him on the veterans' disability cases. We're going to take over Joe's program, by the way. We're excited about that, and we appreciate the opportunity. And we'll bring Erica and Michael in sometime and do a deeper dive on veterans' disability.
Well, and I represent a ton of veterans, just by the by.
Sure.
And what I've learned from them is even when they couldn't get benefits years and years ago, like even Vietnam era people,
Right.
now when they try on that same set of facts, they're awarded benefits. So the system itself, it seems to have become more liberal.
Well, they have created presumptions. And what presumptions are is that if you were had a boot on the ground in Vietnam and you have a certain medical condition, a certain cancer, we will presume that you got that cancer when you were in Vietnam. It can be a number of different cancers, but this list of presumptive cancers gives you a leg up in proving your case.
I have a client who has spina bifida, and she was born, and she's been in a wheelchair her whole life. and she filed bankruptcy with the office, and she gets this check for $4,500 a month. I said, "What the hell's this?" And she said, "My dad was in Vietnam,
Wow.
exposed to Agent Orange,
Wow.
and they have this connection between
Yeah.
those people and spina bifida births,
Yeah.
and that's how it happened." So it's the weirdest thing. I'll tell you one funny story. We only have about a minute left. But my dad was in World War II, and he was a lieutenant in the 11th Armored
Yeah,
Division.
God bless him.
So I think he was 80, and he has flat feet. So he wanted to get steel arches from the VA. He always went to the VA. They said, "Well, we can't give them to you unless it's related." And he said, "Well, I don't know. It's related. I'm 80 years old." And they said, "Well, apply." And they awarded him a 10% disability
Yeah,
for his flat
yeah,
feet.
yeah.
He got his steel arches, but then also he got this like $32 a month check for the rest of his life, which he could give a damn about.
Right. Well, the our percentage based awards, and the higher the percentage, the higher the monthly payment. And now the maximum payment is close to $4,000 a month, and you can still be working. This isn't a disability from work payment. So it's really a thank you to our service people who have been injured, or whose quality of life has been impaired because of their service. So we better say goodbye here.
Well, soon. I think we give it 2 minutes, and
Okay.
then we play the national anthem, and off we go. Here comes TJ. But yeah, what I wanted to point out is this is an area that attorneys never got involved in historically. I don't know anybody else that even practices in this area, but that's kind of what I liked about Vince. Once in a while we'll see things that other people didn't see, and we start doing it. So we'll be back on in 2 weeks.
Yep.
This has been Joe Fieschko and Vince Quattrini. We do personal injury, workers' comp, social security disability, employment cases, because he also does discrimination, which I never did. And also these vets applications. And the number is 1-800-242-2412. And we'll be on 2 weeks from now, and play that anthem, TJ.
You're listening to WMBS Uniontown. Now,